A budget workshop. Director Roy, Chief St. Pierre, please kick us off.
Tonight we're going to start with police, which is on page 47 to 50. The overall increase is $386,687. Police administration is on page 47. The overall increase is $47,102. Salaries increased $21,783 due to steps and COLAs. Contracted services increased $5,201, all in telephone. This is due to the cost of the language line and the air cards. Supplies increased $2,042, an increase in office supplies due to the move into the new building. Print and supplies $70,000 due to the increase in the price of paper and toner. Gas and oil $672 due to the rate per contract for the first 6 months and estimated the increase for January to June. But as I mentioned the other night, there will be a savings in all the gas lines. It's just not done until we finalize. So you'll see a little bit of savings in those. We opened the bid, as I mentioned, March 18th, and we will adjust in those lines. Fixed charges increased $18,076, an increase in $17,876 in liability and drone coverage for police. From fiscal year 24 to 25, there was an increase of 16%. 23 to 24, 10%. We're estimating a 15% increase for the current fiscal year. Increase in $200,000 for dues due to the memberships for the police executive, which is the Maine Chiefs Association organization.
That's 200. You said 200,000.
Oh, sorry, 200.
A little bit of a difference.
That is police administration. Do you have any questions on that?
Councilor Chittum.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's good to see that we'll be paying less for gas and oil. This increase of the percentages, those are in fixed costs alone, is that right? The 24 to 25 of 16 and 23 to 24 of 10?
For the liability for the
Okay.
drone coverage for police. We've seen an increase in all of our insurances this year when we got it back. Considerable amounts of increases in certain parts of our insurances, and this is one of them.
Okay, and this cost then is, you say drone coverage and liability. Is there an estimate for how much the drone coverage is increased? And what does that cover us for?
Well, that's the liability of the drone. So it's all one insurance piece. So the police department pays for their liability for the drone. The other insurances are in the insurance, which we'll be going over, I believe, on Tuesday.
Okay, so
the insurance really covers us. Obviously, if we have one of our pilots flying one of the drones hits a house, injures a person in flight, all of those things, any injury, property damage, those are all covered with. And it's necessary to have that insurance, obviously, to cover us for that liability.
I just received a notice that my automobile insurance had gone up, and I'm paying $800 a year for automobile insurance. This is an increase of $17,000 for insurance for a piece of equipment that is not used every day, is it?
It's used quite often, more than you think, but it is not every day. I certainly can't say that. It comes in handy whenever we need it, whether we're looking for a missing person, whether we're looking, we had one just this very weekend that we used it quite a bit over the weekend to search the river for a possible suicidal subject. We didn't find them yet, but we need that.
Well, I'm not arguing against the drone. What I'm complaining about, if that's the word, is the insurance of an increase of $17,000. What's the basic insurance for the drone?
We have,
that's in the page here, but I didn't look at it.
We have Maine Municipal associations, so we're in a pool with other cities and towns. So it's not just our rates, it's all rates. And like I said, some of our insurances you'll see have gone down, but some of them have gone up. It's per what has happened for accidents or issues. So you'll see an adjustment in some of our insurances that going up, some going down.
Okay, does MMA allow us to shop other underwriters?
No, they use who they use. Like I said, we're in a pool, so they go out and they do all of the bid and get all of those put together, and then due to the fact that we do a larger amount. We're probably one of the larger individuals besides probably Portland that are in the MMA.
Yay, us. Okay, thank you.
Councilor Harriman?
Thank you. So was I hearing that correctly, that that entire insurances line under administration is for the drone, or are there other insurances?
That is their insurance. It's a liability for the drone.
So $85,000 a year? I mean, my car weighs like 4,000 pounds and goes over 100 miles an hour. This thing, I don't think is that big and doesn't go that fast. I don't know how much damage it can do to warrant an $85,000 insurance premium.
Anything further, Councilor?
No, I'm all set.
Councilor Najin?
Yeah, just looking at that one line, maybe we could reach out to MMA to just get an understanding of why the coverage had gone up so much. You know, if a Cumberland County sheriff is put a drone through a picture window in Falmouth, I guess that would
Right.
that would influence our rate, right?
So it is for police liability and drone insurance. So it's both. I can ask, usually it comes all at one cost on our insurance bill. I can ask for them to split it out if you'd like to see it split out.
If maybe we could just get an explanation of why the increase, you know, so substantially year on year.
Year after year.
I don't believe that we've, you know, done anything as a municipality, and I understand it's pooled, but we certainly haven't done anything as a municipality to cause us to see an increase in our coverage, so.
Next is Criminal Investigation Division on page 47. Overall increase of $215,738. Personal services increase $211,113. Increase in salary wages regular, 202,501 for steps and COLAs. There's 26 sworn officers and 1 civilian. Overtime, 8,612 due to the increase in pay and potential call-ins. Contracted services increased 1,775. There was a decrease in repairs to vehicles of $600 for estimated decrease in repairs due to the newer vehicles. The polygraph testing decreased $300 due to the replacement of the polygraph parts and equipment to update video recording that was budgeted in fiscal year 25 and purchased in fiscal year 25. An increase in service training of $2,675 due to the increase in Maine Law Enforcement Advanced Library, which is required, and cell phone extraction training. Supplies increased $2,570. An increase in printing supplies of $200 for increase in paper and toner. Tires and tubes, $470 due to the cost of tires increasing. Department apparel by $900 due to clothing allowance. Other supplies by $1,000 for evidence collection, CID supplies for increasing in needs and cost. Fixed costs increased $280 in all-in dues for polygraph examine licenses, which is needed in fiscal year 26 for $50, increasing of $150 for polygraph dues for 1 budgeted in fiscal year 25 and in requesting an additional in fiscal year 26. National Associations of Police Accident Reconstructionists, access to online training, $130, and a slight decrease in the New England Crisis Negotiation Associations due to 1 less negotiator. That is Criminal Investigation Division. Do you have any questions on that?
Councilor Chittum?
Thank you. Cell phone extraction, I presume that means getting the data out of cell phones. Is that a service that a number of our trained officers have?
We have 1 currently at this time. We also sometimes rely on the sheriff's department to do some of that for us, but we have 1 in-house guy that is his primary duty. He's a detective with us. So he gets all the training for extraction. He gets all of the new tools, if you will, the lockbox to make sure that nothing can be turned on once it's put in there as evidence. So yes, we do that all in-house. with
Okay.
one detective.
And for various reasons, it's preferable to do it in-house than to farm it out to a contractor.
Yes, we, in today's world and in the way we investigate crimes, everybody has a cell phone, and it is a very valuable source of evidence. So
bet.
we depend on him quite regularly. He's very busy.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Patrol is on page 48. The overall decrease of $18,955. In personal services, it decreased $26,103. The decrease is in salaries regular of $99,210. These are for the 2 frozen police officers' positions that were mentioned earlier in the budget. Overtime increased $57,107 due to the increase in rate and overtime hours. In the overtime line, there is an expense for the in-kind events like the Dempsey Challenge, Balloon Festival, Liberty Festival, and more, totaling $29,272, which is an increase of $2,272 from fiscal year '25. Wages temporarily decreased $10,000 for less outside detail reimbursement, with a slight increase in crossing guards rates from $14.15 to $14.65. Contractual services increased $3,525. There's a decrease in the repairs of vehicles, $2,000, for less outside details. This is offset by an increase in mileage and travel of $200 for increase in use of the Easy Pass and tolls. In-service training, $5,325 due to the academy for new officers and rifle armory recertification for 4 instructors. Originally requested the 2 crisis workers to be paid out of the miscellaneous services in the amount of $221,868, but this has been removed, and we are requesting the council to approve the use of the opioid funds to cover this amount. Balance in the opioid funds is $391,075.77. If we do the $221,868, that will leave $169,207 left in the opioids fund currently. Supplies increase $3,623. There's a decrease in department apparel of $3,000 due to the fiscal year '25 having new officers' gears budgeted for the 2 unfrozen and the new 1 officer that are not in the fiscal year '26 budget. These are offset by increase in printing supplies by $110,000 for increases in cost in paper and toner. Gas and oil, $2,000 for increases of number of vehicles. Tires and tubes, $300,000 for the increase in cost of tires. Public safety supplies, $1,109 due to the purchase of motorcycle helmets, due to them being 18 years old, which is a safety issue. Range supplies are being covered under the federal asset forfeiture funds. Education supplies, $104 for the slight increase in statutes. Other supplies, $300 increase in canine expenses for the 2 dogs. Capital outlay request through the fund balance, $459,100 for the 6 Ford Explorers, 1 pickup, and 3 Chevy Tahoes. Net the trade-ins, and there's also a request for fund balance of $16,500 for car camera systems and mobile radios for new cruisers on page 32. That's patrol. Any questions on patrol?
Counselor Glant?
Thank you, Mayor. What can opiate funds be used for?
For drug use,
Anything?
anything related to drug use. So when you guys did the event in the park,
Yep.
you were able to use that. Anything drug related, it can be used for.
Okay, thank you. One other question. Do you all have bikes, bicycle bikes?
We do have a couple bicycles. They get used from time to time, particularly by our walking beat officer that obviously, as summer gets here, we're going to put them back out on the road, or actually late spring. We're dealing with a little bit of a manpower issue, but he uses that quite regularly, and some of the officers will take it out periodically in addition to doing their walking beats that they
Are they in decent shape?
They're okay, they could be better. We have probably, I don't know, I'm guessing like 1 or 2 that are usable and safe.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Counselor Roy?
Thank you. The question I have for this is, let's say we have a great year of hiring. You're down some officers right now, and we have 2 frozen positions. Let's say we hire enough officers to cover those 2 frozen positions. What happens? Can we unfreeze them throughout the year, or how does that work?
Administrator O'Malley?
We would have to come back to you folks, excuse me, to ask that if the chief if we go with the freezing of the 2 positions and the chief's able to hire 6, we would come back to you folks to get authorization for that. It wouldn't be a full year because, I mean, it would be great if Chief St. Pierre could hire somebody, 6 right away, but I don't see that happening. I think he could probably comment better on that in terms of the applicants they have coming in right now.
Sure. So we're currently 8 people down. We did good for a little while, and then we had a few people retire. Sergeant Whalen retired, Officer McQuinney retired, Lieutenant Clifford retired. So then that sets us back, of course. I think we're going to do much better, especially given that we're moving into the new mill, and we're going to do an advertisement basically for recruitment purposes, and I think that's going to certainly help. I'd love to see 86, which is why I asked for more last budget cycle. And we really tried hard to get those people. We're reviewing applications every day. We have 2 interviews planned right now. We have 1 going through the process, so that's 3. But I anticipate that probably at some point we could lose 1 or 2. We literally have, I think, 9 people that can leave at any given time. So that's concerning for us. So I don't think we're going to get to that level that we can achieve the 86. But I'd like to see it if we could bring it back to you folks. If we get to, as Administrator O'Malley stated, if we can get to, I think it'd be 84, maybe bring it back up and say, hey, is there any chance that we can unfreeze these 2 at that point?
I just wanted to make sure that that's possible, if that happens. So.
Right, you're saying that if all these positions get filled, including the 1 or 2 that might be leaving, and if there's time left in the year and you have 2 more that you could hire, we can revisit it at that time, correct?
I would think so, but that's, I believe, up to the council, whether or not you would make that ruling that you would allow us to take that back to you for action.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you. Councilor Sol?
Are the crises workers also officers as well?
No, they are not. They're hired generally from Spurwink, which used to be Tri-County Mental Health. So that's who they primarily work for, but they're devoted, almost 100% to us. They're out there working every day. We currently only have 1, and we're in the process of hiring a second one, but they have funding for up to 3.
Okay. I saw that the 1 less negotiator on the previous information we were talking about. Is that the same as, is that because you didn't have enough?
That was just for
employed?
membership.
Oh, okay.
For the training. There was
Okay.
1 less that was going to be going to training than last year.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Councilor Najin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good to see you, Chief. I've got a few questions about just some of these pieces. When we talk about being 8 officers short, we're 8 officers short based on unfreezing the 2 positions last year, correct? So ultimately, we're down.
We're at 78 currently right now, so 86 minus the 8 would be 78. So that's where we're at right now. We also do have, just if I can comment, we have 3 people that are out either injured or 1 is pregnant at the time. So we face injuries in the line of work that we do. So, I'm not opposed to freezing them. I asked for them last year because I think we desperately need them, and I'd like to have more officers out there. I can tell you our officers are tired, and they're working very hard. A lot of them are getting forced for overtime, and I don't think that's a healthy work environment. So I would love to get back up to 86 if possible. I don't think it's going to happen this year. It could. We could get an influx of applicants, hopefully blue pins, so we don't have to wait for them to go to the academy. We currently have 1 there that has 8 weeks left, and then he has a 3-month training period before he can get out on his own. So all things considered.
Understood. And so looking at the revised budget versus the actual budget for last year, the majority of the positions that have vacated are from patrol, or are they from other departments as well?
No, they're mostly from patrol, honestly. The ones that we just lost, we in one from the Criminal Investigations Division. So we had an officer, a sergeant, a lieutenant, and a detective. So basically 4 different people from different ranks, if you will.
Okay. I would highly suggest, of course, that if you are in a position to hire more than we're allocating, that you come back for a supplemental budget. I do believe that more officers on the force is actually a good thing in these cases, where I believe we're in a situation where the amount of calls that we're answering, based on the amount of people who are actually on the road, it's a difficult piece to manage. From the vehicles in public safety equipment perspective, and I'm glad to see vehicles are on here, we're moving that to the to the fund balance, is that correct? Okay.
Correct. It's on page 32. You'll see the items.
Okay. And I guess the only other question I have within this is, I know, and this is with the budget overall, I know that some of the earmarks were frozen from the federal government, and so there are pieces of equipment that come to mind, like our crime scene investigation unit, as well as the fact that we still don't have a tactical response unit in the community. I noticed that there was a small amount of budgeting for some type of equipment. Do we have a plan for trying to fill those 2 important pieces of equipment?
So we had some congressional asks this year that looked really good for quite some time. We were, I don't want to say promised, obviously, there was no promises made, but we applied for over $1 million, or 1.3, I believe was the total number, in equipment. That included, body armor, vests, all the desperately needed stuff, the armored vehicle, or rescue vehicle, is how we'd like to call it, that I think is desperately needed and we should have. I was just informed just last week that everything's on hold right now, based on where we're at with any grant or funding requests, unfortunately. But I was also told that we could reapply for FY26. And that'll be coming up soon, and we can use the same application, and they believe that it's a sweet spot that we have a good chance of getting it. But again, that's what I was told last time, so there's certainly no guarantees, but a lot of that equipment we could certainly use.
Certainly. And just before I pass it on, the Russell Street attack that happened in Auburn last year, how many of our officers responded to that?
Everybody that was working, I would say, and then I think we had the county working to cover our calls while we were over there, and the county also contributed to there as well. I mean, when a large-scale event happens, we all cover each other, we all respond, we all pitch in.
And we were responding in our regular patrol vehicles, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilor Gallant?
Thank you, Mayor. So, being known for not being too politically correct, and thinking about the county and the county budget, how much do we get from the county sheriff's side? If you can say, I hear you're short of people, is it possible to rely on them to cover some of your overtime shifts? Or just pretty much we just pay so that Poland and other cities can have their protection and we have to do our own?
We generally rely on mutual aid, so if they come and help us, we're not paying them. They're doing it because we need the help, or we're doing it because they need the help. So we're not incurring overtime. They're not charging us for it if we go there, and vice versa. So, I mean, we're looking at obviously 2 completely different budgets. So that's not the case, if that answers your question.
Sure. Thank you.
Councilor Chittum?
Thank you. Following up on Councilor Gallant's question, how many times did we rely on mutual aid to have the sheriff's department over here last year, for example, just off the top of your head?
I'd have to guesstimate maybe 5 or 6 times throughout the course of the year for a rather major event. They come in here all the time. They stop cars. They can stop cars here. We can stop cars in Auburn. Auburn can stop cars here. So all of those things said, they can do that. But as far as an actual mutual aid pact agreement that we really need some help over here, or they need help from us. I'd have to guess.
Yeah, less than 10.
Less than 10, 5 or 6 is my guesstimation.
I'm going to put you on the spot, Chief. The amount of money that we're paying to the county to support the sheriff's department, are we seeing that kind of assistance? Is it a good investment? If we had a choice in it, would we spend this money to support the county sheriff based on what they do for the city?
That's a good question, but I can tell you that anytime we call them, they're here. Anytime we ask them to cover our calls so we can be elsewhere or devoting our time to a certain situation that's unfolding, they're here. I've never seen a department, whether it's Sabattis, Lisbon, Auburn, or the sheriff's department, neglect their duties to come help us when called. So I think there is value in paying some of that, or whatever we're forced to pay. You know, I understand I understand where you're coming from. You know, like we're almost paying our taxes here, but we're also paying the county taxes, which seems to be double troubling, if you will.
You're absolutely right, and I'm glad you mentioned Sabattis and Lisbon. We don't support them in any regard whatsoever, but they come on mutual aid because we provide mutual aid to them.
Correct.
So it's a mutual back-scratching situation. It's got nothing to do with money.
Right.
And yet we are supporting the county sheriff's department through our 23.9% share of the county budget. I have a couple of mundane questions for you.
Sure.
Going back over Director Roy's, I want to clarify for the folks who are, in fact, following at home, that the printing has not gone up 110,000. It's gone up 110.
Oh, sorry.
And also, similarly, the tires are not 300,000, they're 3,000. So I know we're dealing with a lot of thousands here, and there's a lot of numbers in here, Director Roy, but, and finally, I was under the impression that the crossing guards are paid by the school department, but they are part of the police department?
Yes, they are.
May I reiterate that the crossing guard who services the Five Corners, Sabattis and Ash and so on, continues to operate in contradiction with the traffic signals. And if you could get the word down to him that it's a good idea to let the kids cross when the traffic is stopped by a red light, instead of letting them cross and stopping traffic when they would otherwise have a green. That's a frustration.
I could certainly
Thank
make
you.
sure that gets addressed.
Thank you.
Next is the Service Division on page 48 and 49. The overall increase of $79,634. Personal services increased $38,936. The increase is all in salary and wages due to steps. The same number of employees in this division, 10 employees. Contracted services increased $40,398, an increase in printing services of $1,885 due to all the business cards for the new address. Maintenance and license, increase of $38,513 with the increase for the SIMS cards, for the body cameras, for when they are out of range to keep the constant feed going. Body camera agreement, first 5 years, and different software. One for sending out route messages to patrol when the ability for them to respond. Supplies increased $300, increase in paper and toners. Fixed charges remained flat. Any questions for support division? Next is police building on page 49. Overall increase of $60,175. Personal services increased $41,035. Charges for Public Works building maintenance increased 5%. The new position hired in fiscal year '25 is charged in Public Works building account, but started in fiscal year '26. Will be charged to the police building account in fiscal year '26 and '25. It was charged to the city building account. Contracted services increased $20,640. The police are slated to move into the new building in fiscal year '25, so there is a large increase in cleaning services of $29,600 for more hours of custodial time due to the size of the building. Budgeting for 15 hours a week of additional time for 52 weeks. Telephone is increasing $600 for the new police security gate line at the new building. Utilities, electrical and heating are increasing by 1,000, 1,800, and 900 for the estimated increase due to no historical data for the cost of the new building. So that will be the first, we will not have a full year to see what the historical data is. And a decrease is offset by a decrease in repairs to building of 13,260 due to the items in fiscal year 25 for CAM for the new police station that will not be required in fiscal year 26. Supplies decreased 1,500 due to the estimate for the custodial supplies decreasing. Capital outlay remains flat. Are there any questions on police building?
Councilor Harriman?
Thank you. Is the rent or the lease payment for that building included in this budget, or is that in a different section?
It's in a different section, so it's under the debt, which we'll be going over tonight.
Okay. All right.
Councilor Chittum?
Thank you. We're having more hours of custodian, but he's using fewer supplies? How does that work?
Correct. So I know Louis is in the audience, if you want to.
Yeah, I believe, without digging back in all my materials, that the decrease is we needed to gear up and buy additional equipment, and we carried that money last year. And so once we purchase that equipment, we won't need to purchase it again for 10 years.
Thank you.
Next is Animal Control Officer on page 49. Overall increase of 2,993. Personal Services increased 2,223 due to steps and COLAs. There is one employee. Contracted Services increased $500. Repairs to vehicles due to 2018 needs more repairs. Supplies increased $270. Other supplies, $500, due to increases in usage for the tranquilizer and other supplies. Departmental apparel increased $106 due to the increase in rates for t-shirts going from $55 to $95, and pants going from $65 to $78. This is offset by a decrease in gas and oil of $336 due to the decrease in gallons from 50 to 40 gallons. Any questions in Animal Control Officer? Next is the drug enforcement, drug forfeiture on page 15. Tonight I gave you all a new sheet. We removed the tasers out of the general fund to be covered for the federal forfeiture fund, and it was just forgotten to be put in the federal forfeiture fund for $127,260. You'll see that at the last item. This is not a tax-based fund. Monies are derived from prorated shares of drug cases based upon local involvement. There are very specific criteria for expenses charged here and must be related to drug I can't even speak. Typically very conservative on the revenue side. There is a decrease of 200 this year with the ability to fund deficits through the previous year's surpluses. Fund balance at the end of fiscal year 24 in the financials, you will see $1,000,002. Personal services, there are no budgets for personal services in this account. Contractual services increased $12,130. An increase in test services of $10,990 for test drugs, Maine State Lab, $3,000 for TrueNarc testing kits, $990, and civil service exams of $7,000. In-service training increased $7,180. This is all for accreditation, training, and travel. The increases are offset by decreases in miscellaneous services, $6,040, for removing the confidential informant fund, no longer able to use federal funds, removing of the input of the ACE and the AIR data. Supplies decreased, $17,360, an increase in public safety supplies for the state, funding of $6,540 for the drone repair, air data, drone software, and input ACE software. Other supplies under state, $3,000 for increase in K-9 supplies and for the confidential informant fund that was removed from the miscellaneous services in federal. offset by a decrease of public safety supplies, federal, $23,900 for rifles, ceramic plates purchased in fiscal year '25. Other supplies, federal, decreased $3,000 due to the removal of the drone equipment upgrades purchased in fiscal year '25. Capital outlay decreased $28,820, decrease in office equipment $47,620 due to the digital intelligent forensic workstation for Cellubrite $10,320, the blocker lockers, storage of cell phones $5,000, gym equipment replacement $18,700, and drone night vision thermal imagery cameras $13,600, all purchased in fiscal year '25. Vehicles increased $18,800 for drug forfeiture portion of the replacement of the police vehicles that you saw earlier. And then we had that adjustment in public safety equipment of $127,260. So fund balance estimated to end fiscal year '26 will be $557,799. Are there any questions on drug forfeiture?
Counselor Chittum.
Thank you. Say that last number again, Director Roy.
$557,799 is the estimated end of fund balance as of the end of fiscal year '26, if everything falls just right.
Okay, so we have drawn that fund down by $700,000 or so. How much money came into that fund this last fiscal year?
Last fiscal year, if you look at the page of top of 50, you'll see in 129,233 came in.
So I think it's a little higher than that. It's actually, I just got this number from Sandy today, 133,496 came in since July of '24.
We were looking at 24.
Oh, yeah,
Fiscal year
24.
24.
Oh, I'm sorry, my apology.
Okay, and I think we heard last year, Chief, that you're projecting that the revenue or the income to this fund will diminish over time? Is that still a fair statement? Would you-
Yeah, I have some numbers if you care for me to share them with you. We currently have $1,364,000 in balance right now. But that excludes $257,853 that's currently earmarked for the move to the new mill that we haven't spent yet, and that's going to be used for miscellaneous equipment that we need, mats under chairs, shower curtains in all the showers, et cetera, et cetera. So we're still going to spend from that 1.364, we're going to spend that 257, and then in this budget, we asked for 313,174, so that's an additional 313 to be subtracted from that 1.3. And then an amount budgeted in '25 that we have not yet spent is 106. So we normally buy range stuff, vests, uniforms for new officers, evidence supplies, changeover for vehicles, lights, cages, et cetera, as well as training out of that. I fear that if we continue to use drug forfeiture money for basically everything, I just put in another $127,000, as you can see, that got added today for tasers. And the reason why we're doing tasers now is now officers have to have their own taser because they're they're proprietary for evidence. So when you turn them on or get ready to fire them or point them at somebody, it starts recording and it says, you know, Chief Dave St. Pierre is pointing this taser, it's now my taser, and all the evidence that accompanies it is on me. Kind of like the body cameras are all individual, and now we all have individual cell phones as well. That's the way things are going, and we used that. I think we were responsible and used that 127 out of that. But again, and I've said this, you know, year after year, I just fear that we're going to lose. We're going down. We've just recently spent a lot of large purchases over the past 2 fiscal years. You know, new Glocks and ammo and training, $87,000. The deposit on the new lockers that we put in the new station, $291,000. Access control at the new building, $256,000. Cameras in the new building, $218,000, for a total of recent purchases of $853,000. prior to even what I'm asking for today in this budget. So it's going to take us well below $1 million. In my estimation, we're going to end up with a balance of about $700,000 if all gets approved as is. We don't get a lot of money in every year. Some of the money that we're getting is really, it's actually old money from drug cases that perhaps 4 or 5 years old currently at this point. Sergeant Roster and I talked on the way here today, like, we just don't see the forfeiture money coming in like we used to. A big driver was when marijuana was illegal. It tended to be a cash business. No longer are we seeing that. There's a lot of advances made by even the drug dealers who are currently not just exchanging large amounts of cash that we're intercepting. They're using various platforms such as Venmo and other platforms that, we not always become aware of, and are able to go seize those funds out of that. So it's a little bit more difficult. We're getting less money in for sure, I can say. And we're depleting this rather quickly. Will we be okay this year? I think so. But if we continue to do this year after year and fund everything with this money, and then we run out of the money, my fear is that where are we going to get it? We're going to have to go after other things with the taxpayers. Not that I don't realize that we do need to spend this money. I understand we do. We can't just hoard it, and that's not our purpose. But that money has to also be used for certain things. We can't just use it. Let's say we had a budget item for bottled water, for instance, and then we said, okay, let's remove that line item from the regular budget and make it drug forfeiture money. We can't do that. We already have that. That's what's called supplanting.
I understand that, and we're going to have this conversation, I think, every year, Chief.
I believe that, yeah.
I
That's okay.
encourage you to spend as much as possible. I'm told I had been under the impression that this could be used for any police business, but I was corrected. That's not the case. There are only specific items that you can use this money for. However, every dollar that you are not using for legitimate, that's the wrong word, for authorized expenditures in the police department is a dollar that the taxpayers are paying. So my goal is to have this drug forfeiture money account at zero and have actual all police expenditures accounted for through the general fund, and not have a savings account for the PD, which is the way it appears now. So I made these comments last year. I'll make them this year. I'm going to make them again next year. I'm told that you have used all the money that you can for all of the appropriate expenditures within the police department, and that there is nothing more that you can remove from the general fund and pay for with the drug forfeiture money.
Right.
That pleases me. I'm glad to hear that, because otherwise it's the taxpayers that are supporting the savings account, if you will, in the police department.
Understood.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Councilor Harriman?
Thank you. So I'm also glad that you're using as much of that as you can. I did want to go back to the revenues. So at the top of page 50, just the drug forfeitures state and drug forfeitures federal. And I know it varies because you never know what cases you're going to work on, but I see in 23 we brought in about 41,000, 2024 about 64,000, and then so far this year about 133,000. And that's just because it varies year to year, and it can go up and down. Is that why?
Yes, correct. It certainly does. And as I stated earlier, some of this money we just got, I think we just got another $36,000, which sounds great. If we can continue to get that, and it's counted on, then it's fantastic. And I'm not afraid to use it to lower the tax burden on the community at all. But I think some of these cases, like that $36,000 I just explained, that's like a 5-year-old case. That we're just now getting the money from a case that was 5 years ago. So as I stated, the money that we're getting from current cases is going to catch up on us, because we're not getting the forfeitures, or not taking in the forfeitures that we have in the past.
Okay. Understood. And then I just was curious about there's a donation there of 81,000 for this year. Do you know what that is for?
What page are you looking at?
Page 50. Under the 2025 actual.
The division is 5903.
I see that. Oh, yeah, donation.
Maybe that is. Is that the gym equipment that the Geiger Corporation
That's what I
donated?
believe, but I
The
think.
donation we received, we told about from Geiger. I'm
Counselors,
pretty sure that's
counselors, I appreciate your guesses. We will wait to hear from the director.
Yes, that is the donation from Geiger.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Counselor Sol.
I didn't have a question. I just wanted to say, I do appreciate that you take as much as you can out of the forfeiture fund. I would not like to see it at zero. I think you need it. I think you need to be able to purchase new handguns and equipment throughout the year. But doing what you can to help the taxpayers is definitely appreciated, so thank you.
Counselor Gallant.
Two-part question. How often do you use that fund during the year, other than budget time? Are there times during the year that you have to dip in that fund to buy or replace or do things?
Yeah, from time to time, I will come to you folks, when we realize we really need some equipment and I don't want to have to fund it other ways. So that does happen, like when we purchased our firearms that were aging firearms and we needed to replace. I didn't put that in the budget, and instead, we asked for it through drug forfeiture. So that happens quite regularly. Most recently, an item that comes to mind is it was a safety concern that we had at the range to level out the range so that there wasn't a tripping hazard on rocks and all that stuff. And we needed a new trailer for the firearms because the aging one, it was leaking, it was full of mold and all of that. So we came to you and asked you for that. So that does happen throughout the year. It happened a few times this year alone, to my recollection.
Thank you, Chief. That's another reason I would not support taking it to zero, because then you have to come to us and we'd have to find the money. So I believe having some sort of a balance is crucial for you to be able to do the supports and things you do.
It's important to note as well that we do collect interest on this money while it is in our account.
Further questions, comments from the counselors? Counselor Chittum, yes.
Thank you. Just curious as to why the gym went into as a cash contribution to the drug enforcement or the drug forfeiture fund.
Because the other portion of the gym equipment was paid there. So that to keep track of it, we put the donation in the same account that the funds were going to be coming out of.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Counselor Najin.
Chief, just really quickly, overall, I appreciate the budget you put forward, and taking into account the fact that obviously it's a tough budget year. I am also, I think everybody is aware that the police department is the second largest overall funding department that's funded other than the school system. So there is a lot of expense there, but also at the same time, there's a lot of challenges, I think, as far as like technology pieces that we perhaps don't have, as well as the equipment that we constantly have to rotate through. And so it's understandable that it would be such a large portion of the budget. One of the things that I just have a bit of concern about overall is the amount of people that we have on patrol. I think it's very important to have a strong patrol unit for the city, and I understand that we're working to remedy that. One of the questions that I'd have, and it's probably not appropriate for this budget, but I do know that there are technologies out there that speed some of the time that officers are spending on both reporting and also on tracing information for contacts. And so I do think that possibly we should look into some of those pieces, because the more time an officer is on the road, the better it is for the community, in my opinion. And also, nobody wants to spend 8 hours doing paperwork for one arrest. So, that's one piece I wanted to bring forward. Also, concerning the drug asset forfeitures, we are normally dealing with either a state or federal agency when we're making these arrests. Am I correct?
Often that is the case, but not always. It's not exclusive of dealing with the feds. We do have a federal partner from each individual. I think many of you have had these discussions with, DEA, FBI, HSI, and we have people assigned to all of those. So that pays dividends in that. So like even if they do a case and we're working with them with one of our task force agents, we have equitable sharing that we also take some of that money, whether or not it happens in Lewiston. If it's one of our officers that's helping out in Sabattis, for instance, with an FBI case, and there's a forfeiture that happens, we're still going to be privy to some of that or a portion of that.
Consider some of that pool, yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's one of my questions concerning like forensic accounting practices. I know that like that's something that we would never be able to house within the budgets that we run at the police department. But I'd imagine when working with some of the federal agencies, there is an ability to go after funding that's hidden in Cash Apps and Venmo and blockchain coins, pieces like that. So hopefully, if that becomes a priority, we'll see more funding coming into.
And while we may not have those resources available directly to us, we have them available by our federal partners. So again, not just because of the money aspect, we're not all in it to make money and fill our forfeiture jar, so to speak. We're looking to have the assistance in the resources that they can bring to the table. Quite frankly, the FBI has more resources in many different ways than we do. Homeland Security is, we have a guy that's there now, and we are generating so many cases, not so much forfeiture, but the technology that he's using mostly belongs to HSI, but we are benefiting from it. A lot of these are the sex trafficking ones that you've seen me present or report out, child abuse, things like that, sexual exploitation.
And so coming back to just like inter-office cooperation, I know in the past we worked with the state with PACE to do some patrols on the state highways. I don't know if the funding's still there, but is that something that we could talk to the sheriff's department about as well? Just basic traffic infraction enforcement, leaning on some of our partners in the community that we're paying, like for instance, 25% of the budget overall for the Androscoggin County, and dealing with a lot of problems in our community from surrounding communities when they come here and crimes are committed. I'm just wondering if there's like a balance there in which we could ask the sheriff's department, for instance, for maybe like 10 hours a month, 10 hours a week even for traffic enforcement.
I could certainly have that discussion with the sheriff and see what he's willing to put forward. I mean, we benefit from the stops they make, whether it's in Turner, Green, or whatnot. A lot of these cars are traveling to Lewiston. They're making those stops on the outskirts. The sheriff's department does come into Lewiston quite frequently. I see them, I witness them myself, stopping cars here. We're not asking them to stop them, but they're doing so on their own. So again, in addition to mutual aid, there's still police officers in the entire county of Androscoggin. And Lewiston is a big portion of Androscoggin. And I think more than often than not, they're more than willing to come help us. They're even willing to come, I don't want to call it poaching, but if things are quiet and green on a Saturday night, it's not unlike them to come do a little patrolling in the Lewiston area.
That's good to hear, especially considering our staffing issues. And the last thing I wanted to touch on, just really briefly, last year we had to face a PD building overrun of, I believe it was $42,000 per month, based on the Category 4 designation that we could not meet for basically to make the building a Category 4 building. Platts came back to us to say that there was an overrun that I believe was $42,000 a month for the life of the 30 years. Is that correct?
For
the construction costs.
So last year, was it last year that we re-signed?
Yeah, we
Agreement?
a new lease agreement. I don't recall the amount, Councilor Najin, off the top of my head.
I believe it was $42,000 a month. The reason why I'm asking this question, and again, I know that it's kind of down the road at this point, like things are kind of already set. But the 911 call center is looking at 85 Park Street. That's going to be $1.5 million that we're assigning on our side, $1.5 million that Auburn's assigning on their side to put the call center in a non-tax-paying building that's separate from the police department. Currently in Auburn, it sits in the fire department, and I'll be asking the fire department the same question. But do you have any space at all for the 911 call center in the current police department?
No, unfortunately, I do not. Another counselor posed the same very question to me recently, and really everything is completely full. If you start at the bottom level, we have our vehicle maintenance and outfitting, garage in the area, as well as all the locker rooms, which is all just employee only, and then the gym that was donated to us, that takes up the entire downstairs, as well as like closets for gear and batons and riot gear and whatever you will. All of the floors are occupied and spoken for. Even at one point, the lieutenant that has been in charge of this whole project actually had to cut his office in half in order to find another room for some storage that detectives desperately needed. So everything is pretty full. Or very full, I should say. I don't think there would be any way, especially to try to redesign that area at this point in time, if we had to.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything
All set
else,
with
Director or Chief? Yeah.
Next, we'll start with fire, which is on
Chief,
page
thank
51
you,
and 53.
Thank you very much.
Chief, thank you for everything you're doing. Please give your department our best and thank them for their commitment to Lewiston.
Thank you.
Chief Garen, welcome.
Thank you.
So the overall increase in fire is $153,024. Fire administration is on page 51. Overall increase of $23,319. Personal services increased $33,394, all in salary of regular for steps and COLAs, and the new position budgeted for the full year this year, which had a delay of 3 months in the fiscal year '25. There are 4 positions in this department. Contractual services decreased $6,612. An increase in repairs in vehicles, $3,700 for emergency lighting for the deputy's vehicle. In-service training increased $500 due to the new deputy chief training. This is offset by a decrease in telephone of $2,644 due to the first light over budgeted in fiscal year '25. Mileage and travel decreased $200 for actual. Maintenance and license decreased $7,968 for a decrease in the ESO record management system. Supplies decreased $1,411. There was a decrease in department apparel of $2,600 due to the purchases made in fiscal year '25 that will not be needed in '26. Individual apparel decreased $363 due to the decrease in needs. An increase in gas and oil of $1,352 due to the increase in gallons for the deputy position. Delayed in hiring during the fiscal year '25, having a full year budgeted in fiscal year '26. Office supplies increased $200 due to the paper cost. Fixed charges increased $148 for dues, slightly increasing for the Maine Fire Chiefs Association, the National Fire Protection Association, and the International Association of Arson Investigation and Maine Building Official and Inspectors Association. Capital outlay decreased $2,200, all in office equipment for the purchase of the workstation and the chair for the new assistant fire chief that was purchased in fiscal year '25 that will not be needed in fiscal year '26. Vehicles for the assistant fire chief is being recommended to be paid in fund balance for $65,000, which is on page 32. It was removed from the budget and put into fund balance. Any questions on fire administration?
Councilor Chittum.
Just a clarification, there's an assistant fire chief and a deputy fire chief. Are those is that the same person?
No, they're two different people.
And we created a new position last year, which was the deputy.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And what is the deputy doing that the assistant isn't doing?
So the assistant fire chief who's in the back is, he's the operations manager, more or less the, oversees the firefighting division, and the deputy fire chief spends more time on the fire prevention and emergency management part of the department.
Okay, thank you. And I think I remember that one or the other of those positions could be partially funded with money from tax increment financing. Director Roy, that may be a question for you.
There was a certain portion that Director Libby had put aside for salaries. He divvied up what would be able to be put in, and we did that. I don't believe this position was one of those positions.
Is there any TIF money in the payroll, the personal services for any of the fire department?
I don't believe so.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I'm just double checking. Yes, there's none. There is none.
Thank you.
Firefighters are on page 51 to 52. The overall increase of $101,637. Personal services increased $77,948. Salaries and regular decreased $7,052. Newer firefighters hired rate lower than the retired firefighters. An increase in overtime of $85,000 due to the increase in overtime for sick and workers' comp replacements. There are 71 employees in this department. Contracted services increased $8,613, an increase in medical services of $840 due to the rate increase of the respiratory and the pulmonary from $44 to $45, an increase in quantity for TB test. Repairs to vehicles increased $1,500 due to the annual pump inspection. In-service training increased $6,273 due to the McCann promotional testing and increase in fire rescue. Supplies increased $15,076, an increase in gas and oil $9,155 due to gallons increasing for diesel. Tires and tubes increase in $500 for engine 5 tire replacements. Department apparel increase in $5,026 for additional coats, pants, and boots. Medical and lab supplies, $100 due to increase in valve and pocket mask and first aid kits. Public safety supplies, $533 due to the increase in the cost of supplies. This is offset by a decrease in individual apparel of $238 for removal of uniform patches. Fixed costs remain flat. Capital outlay remains flat. The request for positive pressure ventilation fans of $6,000 and fire rescue tools of $75,000 are being recommended to be paid out of fund balance and are on page 32. Any questions on that department?
Councilor Najin.
Just really quickly, how many firefighters do you have hired right now?
71, which is full staff.
And you're at full staff, so you have no unfilled positions?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Next is fire communication on page 52, overall increase of $3,766. Personal services increased $3,905. Salary regular increased $2,905, and an increase in overtime of $1,100 for steps and COLAs. There's one employee in this department. Contracted services decreased $164. Mileage decreased $125 due to actual, and outside rental $39. Supplies increased $25. There was a decrease in gas of $25 due to the decrease in gallons with the offset of the increase in individual apparel of $50. Any questions on fire communication? Next is fire prevention on page 52 and 53, overall increase of $5,058. Personal services increased $3,054. An increase in salary regular, $2,804 for steps. There are 4 employees in this division. Overtime increased $250 due to historical data. Contracted services increased $950. Printing services increased by $100 due to the carbon monoxide forms. In-service training increased $850 due to the certification for fire inspector investigation. Supplies increased $880, a decrease in gas and oil of $120 due to the decrease in gallons from 1,500 to 1,350. An increase in individual apparel of $300 for an increase in the rate for the 3 uniforms for the 3 fire inspectors. Public safety supplies increased $500 for the National Fire Protection Association Uniform Fire Codes Book. Small tools increased $200 for hand tools for the investigators. Required tools and equipments. Fixed charges increased $174 for the increase of dues in International Association of Arson Investigation and Main Building Officials of Inspectors Association. Any questions on fire prevention?
Councilor Chittum.
Thank you. Where are you buying gas for less than $1 a gallon? You've reduced your consumption from 1,500 to 1,350. That's 150 gallons, and there's only $120 decrease in cost.
I get the price per gallon from the purchasing agent, so I just estimate the number of gallons.
I want to know where that station is, because I'm going to go buy my gas there.
Public Works.
Okay, I'll talk to the director.
Fire station is on page 53. Overall increase of $19,244. Contracted services increased $19,244. The increase is in utilities, $2,556 due to the increase in central stations, water, sewer, and stormwater. Electrical increased $18,426 due to the larger increase in North Temple Station and Central Station. Repairs to building, $4,260 due to the HVAC cooling repairs and increase in overhead door repairs. This is offset with a decrease in fuel supplies of $5,998 due to the estimate of Central Fire Station fuel, generator, and diesel. Supplies remain flat. Capital outlay remained flat. We have requested painting, flooring, and window treatments at Central Fire for $10,000. And North Temple roof section over Pergola, $15,000, recommended to be paid out of fund balance on page 32. Questions on fire station?
Councilor Gallant.
Thank you, Mayor. This takes into consideration the new station, I assume, all the costs, because we're going to be bringing that station online, obviously, in next year. Have you estimated, how does that fit into this budget?
I have tried to estimate, but there'll be unknown costs, because it will be new.
But there are some costs put in here relating to that. We're not going in blind.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Najin.
So just a couple of pieces. Obviously, I know that on the new station builds, there wasn't a lot of extra room in anything that we were building. Although the space that Ramada, there was a lot of land that was associated with it that would have possibly allowed for some type of expansion at some level. It's a question about the 911 center. Ultimately, the Oak Street Fire Station, which MEMA currently hosts, do we have any idea what's going to happen with that building, number one? And two, do we have like an idea of what's happening with MEMA? Are they losing funding? Or did they have any challenges with operation? Any of those pieces?
So Androscoggin County Emergency Management Agency is in the basement of Central Fire Station, which is on Oak Street in College. As far as I know, that is, I believe that agency is mandated by the, Constitution or whatever, or the charter of the county, or state law even. So they're not going anywhere. Whether the federal government decides to send money to the state of Maine is obviously a federal government decision. But the Maine Emergency Management Agency and the county emergency management agencies, I don't believe, are going anywhere.
And we don't have any other available space, for instance, to put in, to basically relocate the 911 call center into fire department
I do not
buildings?
currently have any space for them. Central Fire Station, might look like a large building, but it's woefully inadequate right now. We have no storage at all.
Understood. Thank you so much.
Councilor Roy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What are we doing with the old Main Street Fire Station?
I assume the city will sell it. I don't know.
Couldn't we put maybe the 911?
There's not enough space. And I think the folks from here in 911, so maybe if we could hold those questions, they can explain the processes we've gone through, how we tried to sell 85 Park Street back when I was police chief back in 2019, 2020. But they can let you know how much space they actually need. So we did look at doing some of these things. Councilor Jean, you mentioned the land over behind the Ramada. Yes, we did buy a big, 2 acres of land, and I believe the fire station requires at least an acre and a half. And there's a lot of wetlands over there, so we're actually going to have to kind of position the fire station when we start building that out there. So there isn't a lot of room to expand. We're also trying to use the same architectural plans that we use for North Temple as what we're using on the one up in the JD Way, off Mollison Way. My hope is that we've made some changes to that, so we're not going to have such a large electrical bill every month for the chief. He often complains about North Temple Street. We are trying to make some changes with Public Works to try to address those issues of the large electrical bill.
Thank you. I do have another question. So North Temple Fire Station, that's relatively new. What's going on with the roof already?
So the $15,000 for the roof is, if you've ever driven by, there's a front patio area. The kitchen is in the front of the building. There's a little patio area, and there's a pergola over it. The way it was designed, the rain is penetrating the building just because of the design of the building. We've been over and looked at it a dozen times. I've had the architect over there to look at it, as well as the contractor. And the only solution that we can come up with is just to put a roof over that pergola. And the contractor that is currently building Station 5 on Captain Bazinet Way gave me that price. During a meeting while we were discussing it, I asked him, well, what would this cost me? And he said $15,000.
And we're gonna make those changes on the new station, right? On
The new station has a roof over the patio. Yes, it does.
all right, thank you.
Next, we're going to do library on page 69 and 70.
Chief Karen, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you,
Give
Chief.
your
Thanks for your
department our
guidance.
best. Director Houston, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Also wanted to note we have a deputy director here, as well as 2 board members.
The overall increase in library is $74,347. Library administration can be found on page 69. Overall increase of $88,898. Personal services increased $85,586 for COLAs for 3 positions, and due to the deputy library director needed instead of a librarian. You'll see under London Services Division, you'll see a reduction in the wages in that division. Contracted services increased $3,277, mostly due to postage increase of $2,813. For the interlibrarian van service is expected to increase due to the new contract negotiated by the Maine State Library. Telephone, $464 for First Light for the telephone lines, the elevator lines, and the fax. Supplies are remaining flat. Fixed charges are increasing $35 for the increase in the Maine Library Association membership. Are there any questions on library administration?
Councilor Najin.
Hi, Director. If you could just possibly explain the deputy director position versus a librarian, how was that decision made and why?
Sure. So the deputy library director decision was made for a number of reasons. One of those is that there's essentially if you're an MLS degreed librarian, the only position that you can hold is management immediately below the director. There's no movement, there's no possibility to advance, and so We were losing talent because people would start with us, have nowhere to go, and leave for another library. So sort of a long-range vision thing for me is I want at least people to have the vision of, you know, I can start here, I can plot a career, I can move up and not have to go to another library. The deputy director does a lot of things administratively that include, you know, filling in for me when I'm gone. I think I represent one of the larger departments that doesn't have a deputy or hasn't had one historically. The library's a big building, things happen there. If I am out on vacation, we need someone who is the point person that you all can reach out to or that can handle things. And so that was just sort of being done by committee before. It's better to have a person who is designated for that. Also, having this person work on coordinating efforts across departments. There was a lot of divisions. There was a lot of sort of siloing between like adult services, children's services, lending services, and the deputy director is helping to ensure that programming efforts are coordinated across floors. That helps with things like intergenerational programming, where we can have, you know, a story time that's themed around a particular subject, and then maybe parents or grandparents are on another floor doing a similar activity. And so a lot of it is just taking, you know, work that we were already doing and making sure that there's a strategic, coordinated aspect to that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director.
Next is London Service Division. On page 69, there's an overall decrease of $44,336. Personal services decreased $46,760, as mentioned before, due to the hiring of the deputy instead of the librarian. Temporary wages increased $1,651 due to minimum wage increase. Contracted services remain flat. Supplies increased $2,424 for a minor increase in most of the book budgets that tend to reflect price increases. Capital outlay remains flat. Any questions on the London Service Division? Seeing none, collection services is on page 70. Overall increase of $17,522. Personal services increased $15,822. An increase in salary regular, $14,410 due to the steps and COLAs. Temporary wages, $1,412 for an increase in minimum wage and for 1 more hour per week for part-time library page. Contracted services increased $1,400 due to maintenance and licenses. For the marina software supplies, statewide increase. Supplies increased $300 in office supplies for specialty supplies for processing books, and an AV item having a slight increase in cost. Any questions on the collection services? Library building, page 70, overall increase of $12,263. Personal services increased $2,052. Public Works charges allocated adjusted for time and wages. Contracted services increased $10,211. There was a decrease in the cleaning services of $22,428 due to the contract. Heating, a decrease of $2,429 due to the decrease in usage. This is offset with an increase in repairs at building of $18,511. Is due to the mechanical systems retro commissioning and the assessment, and to install 3 temperature and humidity sensors. Electrical, $16,010 due to the increase in the estimated cost. Utilities increased $547 due to the increase in sewer and stormwater cost. Supplies remain flat. Capital outlay remains flat. Any questions on the library building?
Councilor Glant.
Thank you, Mayor. Repairs to the building. Probably need some clarity on what the $67,000 is going to be for. I know we got our building guy back there. It just seems like every year there's a lot of building repairs in our library, and I'm trying to figure out if it's just something that's bleeding and we're going to have it every year, or is it a stopgap somewhere or somewhere along the line?
bear with me, I'm looking for the breakdown.
Yes, sir.
We appreciate you being here, Director Turcotte.
While Louis is,
Well, I can start. So there's general repairs, including plumbing and electrical, of $6,000. There's refinishing of Callahan Hall wood floor for $5,200, which is new. There's contracted services for sprinkler of $315. There's contracted services for fire extinguisher for $415. Contracted services for fire alarm systems, $965. The HVAC system at $13,000. The contract services for the elevator at $5,100. General roof repairs at $2,500. Contracted services of the pest management, $1,300. Mechanical systems for the retro, as I mentioned, is new, $17,000. Install 3 of the temp humidity sensors, as I mentioned, $3,800. HVAC repairs, $5,000. The intrusion alarm, $1,185. Fire alarm, $523. And then there's a partial cost of the ESCO contract of $5,100. And that's it.
So I guess my question would be is, wouldn't these contracted items belong somewhere other than under the repairs to the building? Is there not another line or another place we could place them so it's more, it's obviously, we do fire extinguishers every year. Some of these happen every year. They're a yearly contracted thing. They're not a repair every year, they're a contracted thing. Is there a different place so that really repairs might be half or down by 20% or 25% if we put things, in my opinion, in maybe a different category? Because a lot of those items you told me about, I don't think fit in repairs. They're contracted, and it's, to me, it's apples and oranges.
Correct. So a lot of our actual maintenance is put into repairs of buildings and repairs of equipment, but we could create a different line.
I mean, just, if you're trying to track repairs on a life cycle on a building, it's not fair to penalize the building for those type items. The other question I have is the $5,000 for the floor. Could it wait another year? I'm looking at the big guy in the back, because he's
I would default to Joey. In my opinion, yes. Should it? I think it's gone 7 to 8 years without any refinishing,
okay.
and it's frequently used and
Right.
gets a lot of exposure.
Yep, I've seen it. It's not great, but it's not, in my opinion, it's not like a gym floor that you've seen have worn through. So that's kind of why I'm just in a tight budget year trying to look at every nickel or dime we can save. So that'll be probably an item for discussion later. But thank you both for that information.
Councillor Chittum.
Thank you, Director. We had a discussion not long ago about the sound system in Callahan Hall. Could you talk about that for a moment? I didn't see any money in here, and I think you were working with the vendor to try and get them to repair these problems at their nickel.
yeah, so I do have a couple of avenues to pay for fixing some of the issues with the AV system. There's a line somewhere in here that is repairs to equipment. That's not a line that we spend through every year because it depends on what breaks down, what doesn't break down. So the AV system is under that. That is where I would pull that money from. The problems we've been having, in my inexpert opinion, are more issues of tuning and the system just slowly sort of, it needs some basic maintenance and things from an audio engineer or somebody that knows how the equipment's supposed to run. I gather that the equipment is less than 5 years old and it's a pretty sophisticated system. It's not something that I or any of my staff can sort of look at and diagnose. And so I have the money to get that fixed. It's just a matter of finding the people who will do the work. As you mentioned, we had a conversation about it. I did contact the company that installed the equipment and had them come out, and they sent people who didn't know how to fix it, and I haven't paid them yet because of that, but the money is ready. It's just the matter of getting the vendors to do what is needed. I have, in the interim, solicited some other possible vendors from other area directors in the Lewiston Auburn area that run like the Franco Center and other event spaces. So I do have options if push comes to shove and we just need to go to someone else. But I'm optimistic that that system can be turned around pretty quickly when someone who knows what they're doing is looking at it.
Thank you. As you know, Callahan Hall is very heavily used. I'd like to point out that you said we had the greatest attendance at a Great Falls Forum last week in the history of Callahan Hall, and I see that going up and up and up. When we have a sound system that is squeaking and backfeeding and reverbing and squawking, it does not put a good face on the image of the city of Lewiston, so I would encourage you to put that near the top of your priorities list. Thank you.
Councilor Najin.
So, thank you, Director. I've got a couple of questions concerning, there were some hot button issues last year. I don't really see them in the budget this year. And so my question basically pertains to the incongruous and competing uses that we've been dealing with the library over a period of time. Have we seen that those issues have decreased, or that policy has changed in ways that it's more manageable? Because, you know, it was again, hot button issue last year. I don't really see a lot in the budget asking for additional supports. Although I have heard from a couple of library patrons that in the past few weeks, they've been exposed to situations they were uncomfortable with, but it doesn't seem to be a safety concern at this point. So if you could just maybe just elaborate a little bit so we have an understanding of what has changed from last year to this year and what we're doing.
Yeah, so the first thing I'll say is thank you all for last year, your support in adding both these contracted security services and in making sure that we had 2 building monitors and not 1. That's the reason why I'm not asking for more, is we are seeing success with that model in its first year. You know, to speak to the issues, they have been happening less, but we've also seen a large increase in foot traffic. Part of that is related to, you know, it's been a harsher winter. Part of that is we're doing a lot more programming. I've hired 2 new managers, and so we're sort of revamping the public services that we're offering. The capital campaign to renovate the children's departments, drawing a lot of interest from community partners and things like that. So, for example, in January of this year, we had over 9,000 people come in and out of the library. The door count was like 9,144. And in January of 2024, that door count was 3,600 something. So we almost tripled the foot traffic, and the calls for service to police in those 2 months were basically the same. So that's, again, not to say that there aren't still issues, but because of the support that you've given us, we're able to navigate those issues. And I can tell you that one of the most important measures of success in safety from where I sit is my staff morale is much better. Librarians have to directly intervene less frequently in behavior problems because we have either a security guard or a building monitor who is able to take point when an issue arises. So does that...
Yeah, I think that pretty much answers it. I think staff retention and morale is obviously a key. It sounds like the usage has increased dramatically, which is great, because I think the concern obviously is that it's a community resource that should be available to everyone. It's not unhomed individuals I'm concerned about. It's behaviors overall, right? And they take form in both homed and unhomed individuals. So but it's good to hear that we're not facing the same, well, I guess we are facing similar issues, but it's more manageable at this point based on what we put in the budget. Thank you.
Yep.
Yes, back to you, Councillor Gallant.
Thank you, Mayor. Quickly back to my floor. I'd like to know the usage in that space. If we decide to talk about this further, I think that's going to be something someone might ask you. I don't need it tonight. Just if you could say, over the last 2 years, over the last year, it'd be nice to know how much it's being used and anticipated use. You obviously have a good handle on things, and I appreciate that, and your staff. So if you say, yeah, we're looking at more events this coming year, it would be important to my decision. Thank you.
Yep.
Yes, Councillor Najin.
And so I know that you've tracked usage, like online usage pieces like that, but it sounds like you're also counting individual contacts at the library as well. Can you just forward that data to the council so that we can see the increase in usage?
I can do that. There's also a place that you can view it online. Most of the statistics that we gather, we have to report to the state library. And so the state library, through their annual report, they publish all the data for basically all the public libraries in Maine. But I can pass you anything that you're interested in. We have our own basically spreadsheets that we gather all the statistics that are needed for the Maine State Library's annual report. I have those going back like a decade or so. If you'd like to take a look at those, let me know what ranges you're interested in, and I can pass that
I'll send you an email. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yep,
Thank you very
of course.
much.
Since we're talking about the floor in Callahan, yeah, it's long overdue. It could be shiny again. And yeah, as already mentioned by, I forget who, Callahan is the nicest space, I guess maybe beyond to this room, that the city has to host events. And what was the cost to refinish the floor?
$5,000.
$5,000, yeah. Further questions or comments from the council?
Next, we're going to be going over debt service. Page 71, the overall increase of
Director, thank you so much.
The overall increase of $126,136. Principal increased $128,853 based on the sale of the 2023 bond and the estimated 2024 bond that we will be selling. Interest increased $89,458 based on the 2023 bond sale and the estimated 2024 bond sale. The lease is the where the police lease is. Within that number, we decreased $92,175 due to the carry forward. So within this account, we have the JCI lease for $237,861. That's the lease for all of the efficiencies we did. And then in that account is also Mill 7. So for the full fiscal year, it would be $994,000, but due to we have a carry forward because we had budgeted in fiscal year 24 to be in there, and then we budgeted for the full fiscal year 25 minus that 24. So we're due to carry forward about $579,845, so we don't need the full $994,000 this year in fiscal year 26. So that's why you see a decrease. So next year you'll see that increase because we're going to use the carry forward to reduce this portion. Any questions on debt service?
Yes, Councillor Chittum.
Thank you. Just a comment. The city is now spending nearly $2 million a year in interest, if I'm reading this correctly, out of a total city budget in the order of 70 million.
Correct. So 1.9 million will be the interest.
Mm-hmm.
So that is with the estimated 2024 because we do not know. We estimate our interest to be at 4.75. It will most likely come in lower, but we don't know
Sure.
at the time of bond sale. So you might see that decrease.
Yeah. I just point out that nearly $2 million is money that we're spending from the taxpayers to use other people's money. And if we didn't borrow that money, we could be earning interest on it instead of paying interest. Long way to go, and I see Counselor Gallant's hand up, so he and I will duke it out after the meeting.
Yes, Counselor Gallant.
I do appreciate Councilor Chittum's concern, but based on our current budget model, if we don't have any debt, we'll never have anything in Lewiston. So unfortunately, unless we change the model to do that, it's not going to happen.
I appreciate you both.
So do we.
What's next, Director?
So next is intergovernmental on page 73. The overall increase is $725,466. First, we're going to go over the Auburn-Lewiston Airport. We'll call up Jonathan Labonte. I'm not... So the Auburn-Lewiston Airport Board is not requesting an increase in the subsidy. The city has put a request of $78,500 in the fund balance for the CDST hangar building, apron, and taxi lane on page 33. And with that being said, I'll take any, or Jonathan can take any questions on the airport.
Director Labonte, thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here.
Questions? Yes, Counselor Chittum.
Well, thank you. First of all, I called you Manager Labonte several times at our last meeting, and here I see that you're Director. I know what you're due, but what specifically is your title? Since it came from you, I'm assuming it's Director Labonte?
Yeah, so I'm the Transportation Systems Director for the City of Auburn, and under the MOU between the airport and the city to manage, I'm designated as the Airport Director, which is a specific role laid out in the interlocal agreement.
I apologize for calling you Manager Labonte.
All good.
You're
There's worse things you could have called me.
doing an excellent job regardless of your title, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions for airport?
But yes, back to you.
Yes,
Counselor
can we
Chittum.
talk about these T hangars for a moment? Director Labonte, this is a project that we feel will be a revenue generator for the airport. There is a number, or a large percentage of this money is coming from outside funding, and you're asking both Lewiston and Auburn for $72,500, I believe is the number.
It's 78 this year. Last year, there was an allocation of 67,000 or so. So we had a placeholder budget from the framework for the project in the last fiscal year. We brought on the engineering firm, we designed it. The board made a strategic decision at my recommendation that rather than build a small taxi lane section, so a taxi lane is sort of the road off of the main roads that get to the runways. So rather than build a short section and a T hangar, we're building a longer section. So we'll have 2 additional building sites that are pre-approved and already have taxi lane access, which we hope will attract private investment. So that added to some of the cost. So when we had the full amount needed, we reframed that back to both cities.
Okay, thank you. Has this project been bid and awarded?
It has been bid. The FAA process, unlike some of the other federal funding processes, we have to select an engineering firm, we have to design, permit, bid the project. Once we have the bids, we then can apply to the FAA to use the appropriated funds. So we've submitted those documents to the FAA. We have a low bidder who's holding that through mid-May, and we'll have some final decisions to make on delivery timeline at the May 14th board meeting. Construction, assuming things move along, construction should begin this summer along with the private box hangar development that the board approved partnering on. And that would hopefully mean by next spring, summer, those new hangars would be open, which means additional rental income and fuel sales from additional base tenants.
Thank you. Another difficult question, has Auburn committed its share of the money toward this project? And what happens if one or the other cities declines to contribute the requested amount?
I don't think either city has completed their budget process. Originally, the manager in Auburn was recommending both projects that the airport requested, which included the rehabilitation of the landside parking lot, which is not our best front door to the communities. Lewiston was not going to recommend that, so Auburn withdrew. So Auburn right now is just putting forward the additional match for the T-Hanger project.
And the second part of my question, if one or the other cities declines to participate, what happens?
And I think we'll need to have a meeting of the two councils and the airport board to determine the future of the airport. I mean, the challenge with two sponsors is the predictability of meeting our federal obligations, not only to match federal grants, but to deliver the capital program. So it's certainly a bit of a cumbersome process. I don't mean that as a slight to elected officials and the responsibility you have to taxpayers, but there are three bodies for every step of a CIP and a budget process. So if one city did not, the dynamic is we ultimately could still pull the plug on the project. The airport has expended about $500,000 from its reserves already to fund without city support the engineering and design, knowing that when we do get awarded the FAA grant, those would be reimbursed. So the project could still be have its plug pulled, and then there wouldn't be a need for the additional funding.
Okay, perhaps you could sweeten the deal for both city councils by explaining just what sort of money is leveraged by this amount from the cities.
Yeah, I mean, the total project cost, as we submitted now to the FAA, is $3.9 million. So we're asking each city for about $150,000 and change. So for about 8% of the cost, we'll leverage the rest in federal funds as well as state funds.
Okay, that's an important piece of information.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Najin, did you?
Just really quickly, the sponsoring municipalities have intermunicipal agreement as well, correct? Where we're actually contractually obligated to host equal costs. And so I think that we'd be talking about maybe a bigger dust up than just like a meeting, if we were not able to work that out.
Yeah, so the interlocal agreement, if folks haven't seen it, and again, I think I offered in my memo that budget season is going to be difficult for both cities, but I think it would make sense to get folks together, not only if you haven't seen the airport, but to talk sort of strategically about the future. I think the interlocal agreement has been interpreted, and Director Roy can correct me or kick me under the table if I'm wrong. It's always been, this capital has always been seen as something negotiated on top of the operating subsidy. I think you probably could read that the board could adopt a budget that includes capital, and if the cities needed to fund part of that capital program, that they could be expected to contribute that as well. But it's sort of what's the floor versus the ceiling. So the interlocal agreement sets a floor that as long as the board says, hey, we still need this amount, it's when you ask for something above that floor from the previous year that there can be some debate. I think that's part of building the future financial model at the airport. My goal is to try to get to a point where we're not getting involved in the city's CIP process, and we're using that baseline amount to finance our own capital program. The cities gave the airport the ability to issue debt. We probably wouldn't issue that debt on our own because we likely wouldn't have a bond rating that would yield good results. But nothing would stop us where our books are integrated with Auburn's to issue debt alongside Auburn and use the annual subsidy really as a capital program, and then over time try to reduce that as we generate more revenue. That way your budget's predictable. You're not, okay, here's what you need in our baseline budget, and then we're getting in line as you try to navigate a difficult CIP for all of your infrastructure as well.
Thank you, Director Labonte.
Yeah, we've had a lot of good momentum at the airport, so I want to, try to get this done. I think it'll be, I think it's important to show airport tenants and then future tenants that we're moving in the right direction.
Any other questions? Next, we'll move to LA Transit.
Thank you, Director Labonte. And I apologize, your name again, sir?
Larry Allen. Larry Allen.
Yes, Director Allen, thank you.
So the overall increase is $61,022. The city also budgets an annual of $50,000 in the reserve on fund balance on page 33. In fiscal year 20 and 21, the Transit Committee was awarded CARES Fund, which significantly reduced the operating contributions needed. In fiscal year 21 from the city, the funding was carried forward to reduce the fiscal year 26 request. So Transit is requesting $692,298. We're minusing $100,000 that they had in reserves, which would come up to $592,298. The city has within our funds carry forwards of $101,276 left over from those same years, which will total the budget to be $491,022 this year. Any questions on LA Transit? I know I put in there the increases of revenue and expenses. I don't know if you have any questions on that Mr. Allen can answer for you.
Councilor Harriman.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Sure.
Just a question on, I know you're switching providers, and I assume that's going to start July 1? Or
We're on a October 1,
October.
so our fiscal year is
Okay.
October to September.
Okay. And I assume, some of the increase this year is due to that contract. Do you have a good sense of how the costs are going to go in the out years of that contract?
Yeah, so they've provided quotes for the 5 years, so we're able to track it. We could negotiate the budget for LATC for 5 years right now, short of changes in fuel prices and staff lines and things like that. So we're probably in the best shape we've been as far as being able to forecast. So I don't have all the out years in front of me, so I couldn't tell you how it's going to pan out. But this provider had the lowest overall cost. They had the lowest first-year cost, and they had the lowest growth number escalator throughout their 5 years. So.
Okay, that's good to hear. Thank you.
Sure.
Councilor Clant.
Thank you, Mayor. Mine's not so much budget as it is routes and what you all do. I'm not sure if I was emailing with you or someone over there about usage and what we do and where. I took the time to follow buses for, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 days,
Sure.
different places they go, and seeing, and quite frankly, how few were picked up in many locations.
Yeah.
And scratch my head to wonder why we even bother to go there. And yet we have places I think that would be much more beneficial.
Yeah.
Do you guys review them often?
Yeah.
Do you keep track? I think the question I'd asked originally was, do you have a track of how many you picked up at each spot? And I was told no,
Right.
that you don't have a tracking system.
Right.
But I was told that you're getting a tracking system. Is
Yeah.
that correct?
It's installed in half the buses right now.
Okay, so we'll have some idea. It just seems to me from
Yeah.
following them around, and I
Sure.
think the service is extremely important,
Sure.
but it's only as good as the location.
Yeah.
And if you're going to someplace and no one gets picked up there 3 days in a row, 4 days, 5 days in a row,
Yep.
it's might be a good time to rethink it.
Yep.
As well as all the new housing that's come in here locally into the Tree Street area and stuff like that, will we be incorporating maybe some bus stops there, as many of those individuals don't have cars and have a need to go from here to there.
Yep.
So, but you're going to start tracking, so
Yeah.
we can start seeing some data.
Yeah.
How long before you might refigure routes? You're going to take a year to do this, or?
So a transit study was undertaken in 2020 and 21. And so a lot of that ridership, those low utilization areas, a lot of the stuff that you may have seen or anybody may see, following the buses around, there may be 6 out of 30 stops where there's a lot of activity on any of the given routes. And so that transit study was able to really narrow down where we had a higher propensity of ridership, where we were running into capacity constraints, and what parts of those routes were not being utilized very well. Part of this process that we went through in the RFP was we presented 12 different service scenarios. Extended hours, hourly service on Saturdays, Sunday service, and then a change from just fixed route and complementary ADA service
to fixed route, complementary ADA, and demand response. And so if we take some of the low ridership zones, and I did provide all this, but the low ridership zones, basically on the outer end of the Main Street route, or the Minot Avenue in Auburn, or the far end of Sabattis Street. You know, some of those areas would turn into demand response, right? So we're gonna contract the fixed routes, create more density. We're gonna increase service intervals. We're gonna create 30 or 40% more one-seat rides out to the mall area and Walmart and for all their you know, the shopping and things along those lines. We're providing service on East Avenue now, you know, so service to the high school, the YWCA. So there's a lot of modification going into this next cycle for us. So that demand response zones, we're talking about 6 demand response zones, so outer Main Street, outer Sabattis Street, outer Lisbon and the industrial park area, the VA Center, portions of New Auburn, Minot Avenue, and new service expanding down to the industrial area around exit 75 in Auburn. So all of those areas down there, which is right now a transit desert. So demand response is, it's supplemental. It's, you know, you have 2 vehicles dedicated that have, they're handicap accessible. But they would be able to move more on demand, where you have an area that maybe sees 3 regular riders a day or a week. And they would call and reserve in advance, or they will be able to access an app if they have the technology, and they can reserve a ride that way. So it's not as immediate as an Uber or calling a taxi. You know, if you book it a day in advance, if you're planning your trips, you're shopping, you're going to the pharmacy, those types of things, if you plan it in advance, you know, the success rate in getting you moved during your time frames is very great. This vendor is also going to try and provide same-day service as best they can. So they have some pretty strong technology, which is going to kind of give them an overview of all of the calls for service, and they'll be able to maximize utilization of those vehicles. So it's not like an Uber where you order an Uber and it's your Uber, you're the only one that's in it. It's open. So if there are 3 people out on outer Sabattis Street that want to get to 3 different areas in the Lewiston Auburn vicinity, they may get shuttled into Oak Street, where they would get on fixed route buses and go to the mall or that type of thing. So that's pretty exciting.
Good, thank you. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. And, you know, this time next year, we'll have ridership numbers. Every stop, we have 200 stops, 200 CityLink bus stops in the Lewiston Auburn service footprint right now. This time next year, we'll have actual riderships from every bus stop sign, on and off. So we're gonna have some great insight coming soon.
Thank you.
Wait a minute, you have 200 bus stops in Lewiston, Auburn?
You have 200 bus stops in Lewiston, Auburn.
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
How many buses are on the road at any given moment?
Maximum, so right now it's 10 routes, 7 buses on weekdays. This new modified service is 9 routes, 6 buses. And then with the demand response service, there'll be an additional 2 vehicles floating around these demand response zones, and they're gonna have 2 vehicles for ADA paratransit service. So yeah, lots of good stuff.
Thank you. Councilor Najin.
Yeah. So first, I'm glad to hear that we've got a new provider coming in. I think it sounds like maybe a new outlook and new technologies in order to kind of figure out some of the bus pieces.
Sure.
I had requested a bus stop in my neighborhood at Sunnyside Park, and in retrospect, after I've actually ridden the bus, which it seems that we're providing bus service in many ways for folks without vehicles, as opposed to for folks who need to get places. And I'm not saying that folks without vehicles don't need to get places. I'm just saying that some of these routes are like onerous. And so like I would prefer at this point to support a model like, for instance, CMMC is a place that I'm sure people need to go, right? Central Maine Medical Center. So that's close to my neighborhood, and I think I could advocate for some quality connections to CMMC if I could get, for instance, a covered bus stop. Because at the end of the day, even if you're waiting a half an hour as opposed to an hour for service, waiting in the rain or in the snow is not fun. And so I'm just pointing these things out because there's still, I think, a couple of bus stops that need some repair. And when we think about the routes, if we can think about, I know that my neighborhood needs bus service, but I know also my neighborhood needs bus service that runs on more than like once an hour. You know what I mean? And so I'm willing to sacrifice the bus stop at Sunnyside Park in order to get people to, you know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
Just thinking about the ways that we move going forward, because 200 stops when perhaps nobody's at 80 of them or 120 of them.
Correct.
That's a lot.
Right.
And so, yeah.
And so we're going to have so much more information a year from now. We're really going to be able to refine. The good thing about this is we have flexibility because we have an on-demand service. If we wanted to start a pilot, say we wanted to service a sweep through Sunnyside Park four times a day, and we distributed information to that neighborhood and said, four times a day we're going to be coming through at these hours, or something along those lines, right? The shelter out off of South Avenue, right? So this, Elizabeth Street route doesn't necessarily go there, but we could encourage, demand response service into that area. And so with the demand response, as housing development comes online and it's not within, a quarter-mile walk of a location, we can respond by opening up that geographic area where somebody could book a ride online or call and book a ride.
Councilor Harriman.
Thank you.
Sorry, one second. Councilor Najin, did you have something else?
No,
No,
that's it.
okay.
I appreciate that, Director. I'll probably send you an email about a couple of the things that, there's still a couple of bus stops that need some work. And
So if I may, you're going to love this. So LATC applied as part of a Maine DOT infrastructure improvement grant, and LATC is in receipt of $343,000 in federal funds. We've got a matching grant from Bates College to help, and bus stops up at Tall Pines and Montello. Those are all built into the budget for replacement or refurbishment. So there's going to be some good infrastructure stuff going on at CityLink.
was there any consideration for a covered bus stop somewhere along where Looking Ahead Clubhouse is in particular? I know there's a lot of ridership there, so, okay, thanks.
Thank you. Yes, Councilor Harriman.
Thanks. So I saw the proposed service changes in there, and I know that this has been talked about for a while.
Long time.
Back a couple of years ago when I was on the committee.
Yep.
So I didn't realize that is that actually starting this October with
Yes.
the new vendor?
It is.
Okay.
Yep.
That'll be great to see.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, we're excited. So obviously we have to go through this process, but
Well, it's fun, despite just how you just said it. Councilor Gallant.
Getting back to bus stops,
Yep.
I'm not sure I got the correct answer when I needed it. Who's responsible for shoveling them out and cleaning them out? Like on Montello as an example, which is great, I drive there, my mother-in-law is there.
Yeah.
There's this one woman every day,
Yeah.
she's there at the same time every day, she stands in the street.
yeah.
Because nobody shoveled all summer, all winter nobody cleaned it out.
Yep.
Down at Ramada Inn, the same thing, they're in the road. Who's responsible to get those cleaned out?
Yeah, so we do have a relationship with public works departments in each city. Yeah, in each city. And so it is in their list of priorities. It's not the highest of their priorities.
So-
I have had one intervening conversation with Public Works about that stop at Montello, and they were able to get it serviced within 24 hours. And I think they realized that it had been neglected because they said they had to send in some pretty heavy equipment in there
Correct.
to get it opened up. So
When you say you have a relationship,
Yes.
that's like you're paying us, or you're just asking us and we're taking care of it?
Yeah, so I don't know if there's an official agreement between Lewiston Auburn Transit Committee, CityLink, and each individual city, but there are certain infrastructure tasks that each city's public works has undertaken on behalf of the cities in the system. So putting up the CityLink signs in the city of Lewiston, Lewiston Public Works does that. CityLink, as part of its budget, pays for the snow removal at the Oak Street bus station. Because it's contracted with somebody. Auburn Public Works just does the downtown Auburn Transportation Center. The contractor at Walmart does the shelter up at Walmart. So there are many hands. Sometimes that can get a little sloppy from a who's responsible standpoint, but there's been a lot of genuine goodwill and effort amongst many organizations to support transit and the transit facilities.
All right, thank you very much.
Sure.
We're all set with transit. We will move on to 911, which is on page 73.
Thank you so much, Director Allen.
Thank you.
Director Hall for 911.
Director Hall, thank you for joining us.
Good evening.
Councilors, we've been at this for a couple hours. Do we want to take a brief recess? We're going to take a brief recess, councilors. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Hello, welcome back. We're back with, of course, our very own Director Roy and Director Hall from 911.
So 911's on page 73. There's an overall increase of $105,739. I won't go through every light item. I'm just going to ask if you have any questions for Director Hall. You received his memo and his budget in your packet.
Councilor Chinham, yes.
Yes, thank you, Director Hall, welcome.
Thank you.
You've heard a couple of mentions tonight about 85 Park Street, and I just want to ask, I guess, if all other options have been exhausted. Are there any other possibilities for the relocation from Central Fire in Auburn to any other location that could feasibly be done at this late stage of the game?
In summary, I don't think so. We started this process back in September of 2021 when Auburn started planning for their public safety building. We were included in the space needs analysis for that building. We were going to be placed in their new building. I'm not sure that that's even an option anymore. It may be. However, the construction, just the construction costs alone for us to be in that space was close to $4 million. That's what led the cities to say, okay, find another home. At the time, the city of Auburn had purchased 121 Mill Street, which is no longer available to us, but it was something that we had looked at. And the city of Lewiston, from the former administrator, had spoken to us about 85 Park Street. Both buildings were assessed by our consulting group, as well as our staff. 85 Park Street was chosen over the 121 Mill Street location. And at this point, I just don't know of any other, much like you guys were asking tonight from the other chiefs, you know, is there space for us? We've had those same questions. You know, I've gone through the assessing database and searched City of Lewiston and City of Auburn properties, trying to figure out if there are any vacant properties that the cities already own that we could go into. And there's just, aside from either building from scratch or leasing an area, which I think would be very complicated for a 911 center to do, I'm not sure that there are other options at this point.
Okay, thank you. The other big elephant in the room is the consolidation of the sheriffs or the county 911 and Lewis and Auburn's 911. That's still, based on your comment, I think at our last meeting, there is room at 85 Park Street if it were reconfigured to accommodate a large, new, enhanced 911, that it would be a combination.
So footprint-wise, we require much more space than the county's regional center does. Our call volume is close to triple, and we have a lot more staff. So to accommodate their operation into ours, yes, there's enough space.
Thank you, and I would like, I'm going to continue to pursue that. I don't know how successful that will be, but at least ask the questions. And I'm thankful for my position on the 911 committee, and also thankful for your direction, Director Hall. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Najin.
So just as a point of reference for myself, you know, I would prefer that the call center be located in green based on its tax deductible status and the fact that Androscoggin County charges us, you know, a considerable amount of money. I realize that the calls that generate through the call center primarily come from Lewiston and Auburn. You know, I get that 100%. The challenge, of course, is, you know, taxable versus non-taxable properties and the burden of the bills that we pay to the county for services we don't use. I've pretty much put to bed the 85 Park Street piece. I just wanted to, for the public record, have everybody,
Sure.
You know, make the statement that that's where the call center has to go. Other than that, I think that our services are excellent. I have absolutely no issues at all with the request for the budget. It's actually very, very mild. There's not really a lot of increase there, so it's good.
We certainly tried.
Do we have any other questions for Director Hall? Director Hall, thank you so much.
Could I just add one thing
Please
before
continue, Director
I leave?
Hall.
And obviously, I want to thread this needle very carefully. I respond to both city councils. I have a committee to answer to. But as far as the county taxation and the county center, I just want to offer that we do find the director at the county operation and myself, we meet almost daily. We were on calls for 3 hours today during different meetings. And we are working together with them on certain ventures. One example, we're replacing the computer-aided dispatch and records management system throughout the county. That was a price over $1.5 million. We're paying nothing. The county covered that entire cost. The Goff Hill Tower for our new radio system, we formed an LLC with the county, and they're paying a third of that cost, not only to construct the tower, but also the utilities at that tower every month. And then we charge them an IT support fee annually that is increased annually, and they're paying that to us for our IT services. So we do try to collaborate as much as we can to save the taxpayers money. Obviously, it's not a full consolidation like some have talked about, but in every way that we can short of that, I think we're probably doing it.
Thank you for that.
We appreciate your efforts, Director. Councilor Harriman?
Thank you. And in addition to that, you work as the backup to each other in, when there's high call volume?
We do. So every 911 center in the state of Maine is interconnected. So if we're typically running 4 dispatchers on a shift right now, it's not abnormal to have more than 4 911 calls at a time. If that happens, we're one of the few states where you don't just get put into a revolving hold. The call just rolls to our backup PSAP, which is the county, and they have access to our our dispatch system, so it's very seamless to the caller. They have no idea that they're getting somebody at a different center, and vice versa with us. It just happened today. They had a large fire in Mechanic Falls, and we got a couple 911 calls at our center because everybody was calling it at the same time, so it happens frequently.
Okay, and then if you were to be located in the same space as them, you would still do that backup. The only, I suppose, thing that you would be losing would be if something happened to the building or to the communications system or electrical system or something. That's the only downside to be located in the same building.
Yeah, I would say so. We had an incident, I can't even think of the date, but I believe it was last year, where our 911 phones themselves dropped for, I would say, a good hour or so, and all those 911 calls were routed to the county center. So if we're all one center, we've got no place else to route except for maybe another county, whether it's Oxford County, who is not staffed well right now. Probably DPS Augusta would be my guess as to where our backup would be located. The trouble with that is they do not share our dispatch system, so their only option is to transfer that call back to us. Well, if we're too busy to answer the phone, we're too busy to answer the phone. So the caller would receive somebody answering their call, but responders would not be available to send to their call in that situation. It would be difficult.
I see. Thank you.
Councilor Glant?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank you because I probably have learned more about our collaboration with 911 tonight talking to you than I had any idea. And if you wouldn't mind drafting something for the council, some of the things you guys do and how that kind of works. Yep. Oftentimes I get questions, how can we have 2? And you gave me some really good feedback tonight on the whole purpose behind that, and I greatly appreciate that, sir.
Sure, thank you.
Yes, Councilor Najin?
Yeah, just to reiterate, having an outline of some of those shared costs where it's, you have almost like a payment in lieu of taxes in certain cases, right? And so that's an interesting piece that I was actually unaware of as well. So I like to complain that the county taxes us too much, but if they're working with us, that's always good too.
Yes, Counselor Chittum.
What he said and what he said. But we've also heard tonight, and been reminded tonight, that we spent a lot of money getting Mill Number 7 rehabilitated for a police station, and then at the 11th hour discovered that it had not met certain codes, and we looked at dramatic increases in the 30-year monthly rental. I want to make certain that when we evaluate 85 Park, that we have looked at all of the contingencies, that we've checked with the State Fire Marshal's office, to ensure that the building has been case hardened to the necessary degree. I simply do not want to go through the surprise of, oh, gee, guess what?
Right.
Our best laid plans have all of a sudden been. So I encourage you and the 911 committee and the building committee or whoever is involved in this to make certain that we aren't going to get any surprises when we come to the construction.
That is our next step in this process, is to proceed with design and engineering of the facility, and that is specifically highlighted because of the Bates Mill last known. I've actually been asked that question by the previous city administrator. She was curious whether it was a Class 4 building. I have no idea. I asked the people that I thought might know. Nobody knows. But we're going to find out, so for sure.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Hall.
Thank you, everybody.
So the last piece, real quickly, is the county budget is also on page 73. Overall increase of $558,705, or an increase of 14.5%, which we've already gone over on the first night. So that concludes our budget meeting.
We appreciate your assistance as always. At this point, we're heading into an executive session to discuss an economic development issue of which the premature disclosure of information would prejudice the competitive bargaining position of the city. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Councilor Gallant, second by Councilor Nagy. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Lewiston. We're heading into executive session. We will not be back. Have a wonderful evening.